the SEC. Welcome back to another season number 3 of the SEC Recap Podcast. It is great to be back. I'm your host, Ben Warren. You can find me on X at SEC Recap. Find all of the content at secrecap.com. Football this week, ladies and gentlemen. We got football this week. Tomorrow, in fact, I'm recording this on Wednesday. So by the time this is out and you're listening or watching to it, it will be just a few hours countdown until I think Arkansas kicks off first. Arkansas kicking off at 6:30 p.m. on Thursday and Mizzou kicking off at 7 p.m. So we are just outside of 24 hours from SEC football, real football. I know we had a little bit of college football back last weekend. Everybody got to see Florida State fall to Georgia Tech. That was the game of the weekend, but now we are into real football season. On today's episode, we are covering power rankings. Now, I posted these earlier in the week, said, hey, if you disagree with some of these, I actually do too. So we're going to break down the power rankings today and then look at the game action this weekend, do some pick'ems. Man, it is so good to be back. So good to be back. Don't forget, you could donate to the pod. I'll always have the QR code right there. And don't forget, you can check out a super cool merch, SEC Pride merch, and all that good stuff at bonfire.com/store/SEC recap. So let's not waste any more time. Let's just get right into it. Pull it up on the screen. So first, let me talk about the model. I'll pull this up. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll get a quick preview of what the listeners are gonna hear in just a minute or so. But this season have a new model for the power rankings. It is a dynamic model, so I'm just going to talk about how it works a little bit. I did not manually adjust for any of these power rankings. So if you've already seen the post on Twitter or on the website, there was no manual involvement in that whatsoever. What I did was I took a look at efficiency rankings, which uses a little bit of last year's data, kind of looks at what teams have coming back, returning for the 2024 season, and then, the strength at key positions, and then use some other metrics. I'm not going to give away all of the math that I used, but what these are not predicted end of season finish rankings. These are neutral site, head to head. How would each team fare against every other SEC team on a neutral site? And so as we get to see some of these games played throughout the season, we'll have some head to head matchups. And I have a matrix that will factor in the head to head matchups. I'll be able to pick some of those games, hopefully with a high degree of efficiency. And we'll get to see how that plays out. So week over week, you will see these rankings automatically adjust. The model is dynamic. It's not static. So again, with that in mind, this is not a reflection of how I personally feel. These rankings are what the model takes into account and then spits out when we factor in efficiencies, scoring margin, point margin. And like I said, I'm not going to give away all of the metrics that I use. I'm pretty happy with it. Here in a couple weeks, we'll see it really start to refine. I would say right now, your top 1, 2, and 3, pretty much everybody's going to unanimously agree with, right? We pretty much all know who we have in the number 1 spot, probably in the number 2 spot, maybe a little bit of debate for the number 3 spot. Likewise, I think 10 or 11 through 16 in the SEC, most people are going to be pretty much in agreement. Okay. We all kind of know who's in that 16 spot, maybe 13, 14, 15 as well. Where we're really going to see some shifting and some shaking up is that 4 through 9, 4 through 10. So understand, I'm going to go backwards starting at 16 all the way up through the 1, but realize that 4 through 10 spot, we're going to see a lot of movement in that really here after week 1, but especially weeks 2, 3, even into 4. We're going to see that start to solidify, especially as we start to get some of those head-to-head matchups under our belt. So Without further ado, let's just talk about it. At number 16 in the SEC Recap Power Rankings for preseason 2024, the Vanderbilt Commodores. I don't know who else you put there, to be honest. Projected win-loss, 4 wins, 8 losses. Be honest, for them to get to 4, I don't know who they're going to have to beat. You know, they opened with Vatech in Nashville. They get Alcorn State in Nashville. They play Georgia State in Atlanta, and they have Ball State in Nashville. Your gettable games, you'd like to say, are Ball State, Georgia State, Alcorn State. That's 3. I don't really know who their 4th win is. You know, is it South Carolina in Nashville? Do they jump up and bite them? South Carolina's trying to, take a step forward this year. I don't know. Getting to that 4 number in the win column is a tall ask for me for Vanderbilt Commodores, and I just don't think they're going to have a lot of success in the SEC this year. Number 15, Mississippi State Bulldogs. Love what they did with the coaching hire. I'm not really going to get into the X's and O's. That's not what this podcast is about. Trying to keep this one a little shorter. But they opened with Eastern Kentucky in Starkville. Then they got Arizona State in Tempe. Projected win-losses for the Bulldogs. Got them at 5 wins, maybe like 5 and 7. So gettable games, Eastern Kentucky, Arizona State, Toledo. And then that's all front loaded. You know, then they got Florida, Texas, Georgia, A&M. Is Arkansas gettable this year? Maybe. Then UMass. So you'd like to give them maybe those first 3. Maybe they start 3-0, catch some momentum. And they can get UMass at home later for that 4th win. Who's the 5th one going to be? Arkansas, maybe. Maybe they take advantage of Florida at home. I don't know. But again, year 1 of a new coach, I do think the Bulldogs are going to struggle a little bit through that SEC schedule. Moving on, number 14, I got the Arkansas Razorbacks. Bobby Petrino's back, but they have a lot of turnover on their roster. They got Arkansas Pine Bluff for their opener. That kicks off Thursday night, 6:30. It's a big spread. That should be a dub. They got UAB. It's a good program, but should be a win there in Fayetteville. Later on in their season, they got La Tech, right? So there's 3 wins on their schedule. Projected win-loss for the Razorbacks, 5.5. So they've got to steal a couple of SEC games. You know, a lot of people thinking maybe Tennessee at home. That's going to be a tricky one for the Vols. Not really in that boat myself. Think, on the road at Auburn, what can they do there? Going to Mississippi State, that's going to be one, I think, that'll be one to watch. They still might be clawing for the, back 5 in the SEC at that point, but they got to take advantage where they can take advantage. Moving on, number 13, I have the South Carolina Gamecocks. They are trying to take a big step forward. Year number 4, Shane Beamer, of the Shane Beamer era. They get Old Dominion to open the season. They go to Kentucky for their second game, then LSU, then a gettable game at home versus Akron. So looking at a possible 2-2 start, where do they go from there? They got Ole Miss, Bama, Oklahoma, A&M, on the road in Nashville. There's one they can get in the SEC, Wofford at Clemson. So pretty brutal middle stretch there for the Gamecocks. I don't think they're going to win a single one of that 4-game stretch. Ole Miss, Bama, Oklahoma, A&M. Think they do get Vanderbilt after that, but then they play Missouri at home. Missouri coming to town. I do think Missouri is a significantly better team. And then Wofford, Clemson to finish off their season. So maybe a couple SEC wins there for the Gamecocks. Don't see it going much further than that, though. At number 12, Florida Gators. Now, I understand a lot of people are significantly higher on the Florida Gators, but I think overall sentiment is pretty mixed this season. Um, Billy Napier's 3 straight losing seasons, though he's had some good wins. They beat Tennessee at home last year in the Swamp. Um, I do think there's good talent on that roster. It always comes down to that coaching staff, who's calling the plays. We just saw a lot of sideline miscues and uh, chaos last year from the Florida Gators. So looking to see them really rein that in and get that under control. They do have winnable games on their schedule, though. They open with Miami, big game, but they get them in the Swamp. Now, that's not SEC play. I get that. But if they get Miami at home, which they're technically like a 2.5, 3-point underdog in that game, then they get Samford, winnable. Texas A&M in Gainesville, very winnable for the Gators. Texas A&M is loaded. Then Mississippi State and Starkville, that is winnable. So you got really a chance to go 4-0 before your first off week, and then you get Central Florida at home before having to go play Tennessee in Knoxville. So Gators could potentially open 5-0 here. Maybe a little tall ask, especially with that Texas A&M game week 3, but that is a home game. Then they get Kentucky at home. That's going to be winnable. I got Kentucky, sneak peek, got Kentucky sitting just in front of the Florida Gators here. So that'll be one to watch for sure. Georgia at the neutral site, think that's an L. Texas in Austin, L. LSU in Gainesville, man, Florida got the home game dream stretch here with LSU and Ole Miss, but I think the talent mismatch, LSU, Ole Miss, that is not going to go Florida's way, and they got to go to Tallahassee to play Florida State. So I think Ole Miss, LSU, Texas, Georgia, think they lose on the road to Tennessee as well. That's 5 SEC losses out of the 8-game stretch. Mississippi State winnable. Kentucky winnable. A&M, I'm not really betting on it, at least not right now, but possibly winnable. So that's why I got the Gators sitting at 12 in the power rankings. So like I said, coming in at number 11, Kentucky. I'd like to see what happens at quarterback for Kentucky this year. It just always feels like there's high expectations preseason. They always play a super soft schedule to go 4-0, and there's a lot of momentum around Kentucky, but it's not going to be quite that this season. They got Southern Miss in Lexington. It's an interesting game. And then South Carolina comes to town. There's a big back and forth there between South Carolina, Mark Stoops, Shane Beamer, Mark Stoops. So, South Carolina's kind of had Kentucky the last couple of seasons. That's a losable game for Kentucky, even there at home. I'm not going to bet on Kentucky to lose, but I'm just saying, watch out. Then they get Georgia coming to town, calling that one an L. They play Ohio in Lexington, and then they play Ole Miss in Oxford. Think of those 3 SEC games in that first 5-game stretch, they're dropping 2 of them. Then they get Vandy, Florida, Auburn, Tennessee. I think Vandy's a win. Florida, that is a winnable game for Florida, a losable game for Kentucky there in the Swamp, especially if it's a night game. If it's a noon game, who knows? Kentucky gets Auburn in Lexington. That's an interesting one. Maybe a toss-up there. And then they play Tennessee in Knoxville. Tennessee has absolutely owned Kentucky. Not even up for debate. That's an L there. They get Texas in the last 3-game stretch of their season. Murray State, Texas, Louisville. So they're dropping Texas. They're dropping Tennessee. If I had to pick the Florida game, I'd give it to Florida. So there's 3 losses. And then I'm giving them losses to Ole Miss, Georgia, South Carolina, Auburn being toss-ups. So 3-4 SEC losses there that I see. Maybe they could steal one of those, crack the top 10 here. And rounding out this back 6 at number 10, the Auburn Tigers. I want Auburn to be a little bit better this year. I think they have a fantastic running back. What is Peyton Thorne in that offense, though? That remains to be seen. They get Alabama, A&M, Cal, New Mexico, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Georgia. I think Arkansas is definitely winnable there. Oklahoma, I think Auburn's losing that game. Maybe I'll be proven wrong, but if just picking based on my gut, not looking at any metrics right now, preseason, I think Oklahoma's a better team. And then they go play Georgia. So 2 of their first 3 SEC games there are losses. They get Missouri, where they go to Missouri. They go to Kentucky and then Vanderbilt. I think Missouri's winnable. I know a lot of people are pretty high on Missouri because they have a favorable schedule this year, but SEC, Auburn going to Columbia, that's a winnable game for Auburn. Kentucky's a toss-up too. So through those first 6 SEC games, Auburn could split. They could definitely split. They could also end up with 4 losses there if they're not careful. And then they have Texas A&M, Alabama to finish the season. I'm not giving them wins against A&M or Alabama, so I think there's a couple losses there, including the Iron Bowl. No, Auburn fans don't want to hear that, but that is just the way I see it. Guys, before I go on to the top 10 power rankings, let me just take a second to plug the merch on my website. The SEC Pride merch, plus the one I'm featuring here on your screen if you're watching on YouTube or on Spotify video podcasts. My Big Doink Energy t-shirt. Guys, show your love for Big Doinks with your Big Doink Energy t-shirt. You can get those on my Bonfire store, bonfire.com/SEC recap. I will scroll the ticker down here. bonfire.com/store/SEC recap. I have merch for every school, and a bunch of you guys and gals bought it last year. I am so thankful. It's not a lot of money to me, but I do put some time in on these designs. I bought a few for myself. I've bought them as gifts for friends. They come in short sleeve, long sleeve, hoodies, sweatshirts. And a bunch of you all have sent me pictures of you showing off the merch. So Alabama, Auburn, Arkansas, all the way to Texas A&M, Tennessee, Vanderbilt. I've got something for you there, plus some fun stuff like the Big Doink Energy t-shirt. You're going to see me rocking that one on a couple episodes this season. I guarantee it. All right. Cracking the top 10 of the SEC Recap 2024 preseason power rankings. Now, no, there's a lot of people that aren't going to be happy with this. And listen, I'm actually in agreement with you. At number 9, my model right now has LSU at number 9. Personally, I do not agree with this. I think LSU is taking a big step forward, especially defensively. I think they got a lot of talent on offense. I think Garrett Nussmeier is going to be just fine. They open their SEC schedule. Well, first of all, their first 5 are totally winnable. Southern Cal, Nicholls State, South Carolina, UCLA, South Alabama, 1 SEC game in that stretch. Think Tigers are opening 5-0. Then they get Ole Miss, Arkansas, Texas A&M. Ole Miss in Baton Rouge. That is a winnable game. I think Ole Miss is going to be really good this year. They have thrown all their eggs in the portal basket. As good as I think they're going to be. Man, I think that's setting up for a Death Valley at night type of atmosphere. And that is one LSU can absolutely get and needs to get against Ole Miss. Then they get Arkansas in Fayetteville, Texas A&M in College Station. They could split those. LSU, though, they're competitive with Texas A&M. Texas A&M, the new coach, ton of talent. Maybe a toss-up game for me right now, but winnable game there for LSU in College Station. Then they get Alabama in Baton Rouge off a bye week. You got to love that. Again, perfect night game formula right there. Florida in Gainesville, Vanderbilt at home, Oklahoma in Baton Rouge. Such a good home slate. Oklahoma can definitely get that one. Alabama at home, you're definitely getting that one. Florida and Gainesville, winnable. Vanderbilt, winnable. There's 4. A&M, toss up on the road. Arkansas, winnable. There's 5. Ole Miss at home, winnable. There's 6. South Carolina on the road. There's 7 SEC wins that I can count up for the LSU Tigers. So I expect to see big shifts in LSU, especially as we get some week 1, 2, 3 game action under our belts here. Think you're going to see LSU start to shoot up the rankings quite a bit. At number 8, possibly a little low for me as well, Tennessee. A lot of people really high on the Vols this year. I am too. I'm not quite at the 10-2 status that a lot of people are. I love what I saw in Nico in the Citrus Bowl versus Iowa. Huge amount of hype around him. But by the way, here's his name, Nico Iamaleava. But heads up, I'm going to have some t-shirts coming out. Nico, I am a believer, because that's what I am. I think this kid is rock star talent. He's got great weapons around him. Chris Brazzell coming up from Tulane. Brew McCoy's back. Squirrel White. You got Dylan Sampson, who just kills it there in the backfield. Super solid defensive line. I think this is going to be one of the best well-rounded teams Tennessee has had in a long, long time. But schedule doesn't set up super favorably for the Vols. Chattanooga to open the season, NC State neutral site. Both those games winnable. I know a lot of people are picking NC State to be a good team. Listen, they've got a good program. Neutral site game or not, NC State is not beating Tennessee. Kent State in Knoxville, you just got to be careful there. They run a very similar offense, so you're not going to be able to throw stuff at them they haven't seen, but talent on talent, Tennessee should win that game. And then a big road test at Oklahoma in Norman. A lot of people picking Tennessee to lose that game. I'm undecided. Oklahoma's a good team. Haven't seen them in the power rankings yet, so naturally you can assume that I have them ranked higher than Tennessee in the preseason SEC rankings. That's a winnable game for Tennessee. What does Nico look like on the road, though? Big question mark there, but they got a bye week coming off that. So one SEC game in the first 4, potential L there for the Vols. Then they go to Arkansas, winnable. Florida at home, you got to win that one. Alabama in Knoxville, night game, Neyland at night, dark mode. I'm feeling it. I'm calling it. You at least go 2 of the 3. Even if you don't beat Bama at home, I know that's a popular pick in favor of the Vols right now. Not quite there yet. I want to see what Alabama looks like, because I think they're still super loaded with talent. But if you can go Arkansas, Florida, drop 1 to Bama, you're still sitting at 2-2 in SEC play. You get Kentucky at home, Mississippi State at home. There's win-win. You're 4-2. Georgia on the road, I think that's an L, 4-3. And then Vanderbilt, you get your 5th SEC win, 5-3. Now, if Alabama's a win, you're sitting at 6-2. You've dropped an Oklahoma game on the road. You've dropped a Georgia game on the road. You win your non-con games, that NC State game, there's a path to 10-2. Very clear path to 10-2. I'm more in the 9-3 camp right now, but I'll leave room for upside. I always do for my Vols. As you guys know, I'm a big Tennessee homeboy. All right. At number 7. Now, I don't know what to make of A&M right now. This feels high. Number 7. If anything, it feels like I should switch Tennessee and A&M. But they got a lot of talent coming back, man. That NIL money down at College Station, don't lie. They got the money to pay the bills down there, the NIL bills. Texas A&M, let's look at projected win-loss. They 7.5. Tennessee's at 8.5. So it's the way these schedules are setting up. This is what I'm saying, guys. You're going to see these move. This is what the model is showing, not necessarily what I think, because I'm not really going to let y'all peek under the hood of how all this shakes out. So the games that A&M has to start the season, Notre Dame, they're actually a favorite there. They get them at home. It's a non-con game, but it's one they got to win if they want to be in playoff conversation. McNeese State, Florida, Bowling Green, Arkansas, Missouri. 6-game stretch, but doable. You get Missouri in College Station, winnable. Arkansas in the neutral site game. They're in Arlington, winnable. And you go on the road to Florida, which even though it's a road game in the Swamp, that's a winnable game. So you can get your first 3 in the SEC there if you're A&M. Mississippi State and Starkville after a bye week, winnable. LSU in College Station, home game. That's a must win if you want to be in playoff contention. If they drop that game, uh, it's still doable, but they go to Auburn at Auburn and Texas. They got Texas in College Station. Nice home game set up there, but I think Texas is going to be tough. Auburn on the road, just maybe a toss-up for me right now. South Carolina in Columbia, though, November 2nd. I think that's a win for the Aggies. So think they can get to 6 wins in the SEC with the possibility to go 7. I don't think they're going undefeated in SEC play, though. I think that Florida game on the road could be a tricky one. LSU, even though it's at home, a tricky one. And Texas in College Station. I'm not going to give you all 3 of those. At number 6, Boomer Sooner. Again, personally, not super locked into this here, but it's looking at a lot of metrics, end of 2023 metrics. We'll have to see some games played to see how this is going to shake out. They got Temple, Houston, Tulane, Tennessee, Auburn. Tennessee, for me, is still a toss-up right now. A lot of people are giving that one to Oklahoma. They get them at home. They can win that, but a lot of people are calling for a Josh Heupel revenge tour there. We shall see. We shall see. On the road at Auburn, they could win there, even though it's a road game. Texas at Dallas. I think Texas is a better team, top to bottom. I'm going to give that one to Texas. South Carolina at home, winnable. Ole Miss on the road, calling that one an L. Then they got Maine at home. Those are cupcake weeks for a lot of teams. And then they get Missouri in Columbia. That's a winnable game on the road for Oklahoma. Now, Mizzou fans probably expect to win that game looking at the schedule right now, but watch out for that one. Think Oklahoma going to Columbia could be dangerous for Mizzou. They end their season with Alabama at home and LSU on the road. I think that's an L and an L. So potentially 3 games that Oklahoma can drop in SEC play. Similar boat to Tennessee, similar boat to A&M. So a lot of seeming parity here, kind of in the middle of the power rankings. We'll see this evolve as the season goes on. Now, at number 5, maybe a little low for some of you. I'm not so sure. Ole Miss, number 5. Probably some of you would have them at 3 or 4. Right now, maybe I tend to agree. Looking at the schedules, looking at rosters, making preseason predictions, I think that's probably true. Because of those portal additions and the money they poured into kind of stacking that roster for a playoff run, I do think Ole Miss is going to settle the year better than number 5. Let's just put it that way. They get a 7-game stretch before a first bye. So even though some of these are, maybe chalky win type games, it's a 7-game stretch before a bye. And you end it with Kentucky, South Carolina, LSU. That's not going to be easy. So Furman, Middle Tennessee, Wake Forest, Georgia Southern, home game, road game, home game, 4-0. Kentucky at home, you win to go 1-0 in SEC play. South Carolina on the road, Ole Miss should handle that, no problem. But then you got to go play LSU after a 7-game stretch, including a 3-game SEC stretch there. I think Ole Miss could potentially drop LSU on the road. Then you get Oklahoma at home, Arkansas on the road, Georgia at home. Favorable schedule, but I think you're dropping Georgia. You could definitely win the other 2. So potentially 2 SEC losses there. You finish with Florida on the road, State at home for the Egg Bowl, win-win. So really I'm looking at 6 likely SEC wins for the Rebels, potentially 7. Doubt they're getting undefeated. I don't think anybody's picking them to beat Georgia right now. They do get them at home, though. We'll see how that shakes out. Number 4, way too high in my opinion. Sorry. I know I'm going to upset some Mizzou fans. I did that a couple times last year too, but I think this is way too high for Mizzou, but returning production, you lose Cody Schrader. You do have your quarterback Brady Cook and Luther Burden at wide receiver returning. A lot of other pieces as well, but you did lose your defensive coordinator to LSU. What does that defense look like? And what does the offense look like? I think, is it going to be explosive? Are they going to have the same type of running ability without Cody Schrader? We will see. But 4 is a little high for Mizzou. Now, they have a favorable schedule. Mizzou has a playoff caliber, manageable schedule. Mizzou can definitely get to 10-2 and a playoff. But SEC, we're not going to see all those same games played this year, those head-to-head matchups. I would not pick Mizzou head-to-head against probably LSU, A&M, Ole Miss, some games that we're not going to see this year. So let's break it down. Murray State, Buffalo, Boston College, Vanderbilt. They're starting 4-0, okay? Plain and simple. Then they get a bye week at Texas A&M, UMass, Auburn, Alabama. I think they're losing at College Station. Auburn at home is winnable, maybe more of a toss-up than they would like to think. And then you go play Alabama. You are not beating Alabama in Tuscaloosa. I know the Tigers don't play that game often. They might have high hopes, especially by, October 26th. What happens with, what happens at Auburn the week before, are they coming off of a loss? Are they coming off the win, riding some momentum? We'll see, but I'm not giving you that game in Tuscaloosa. I think you're starting there through October. You've got at least 2 SEC losses. Oklahoma at home. I know Missouri fans would probably like me to pick them to win that game at home, but depending on what we see from Oklahoma, I think Oklahoma is going to be better than what we see out of Mizzou. So I would actually pick Oklahoma to win that game. South Carolina on the road, I think Mizzou wins that one. Mississippi State and Starkville, Mizzou should win that one. And Arkansas, the neutral site, Mizzou has owned Arkansas. So I think you go dub there with 1 loss. So I'm looking at probably 3 SEC losses, 3 conference losses. Like I said, potential to go 2 losses. Non-con is super manageable. Shouldn't have any issues there. But right now, I'd give them 3 L's in the SEC with potential upside for 2. Don't have to play Georgia. I know that that's a plus, but Alabama on the road, A&M on the road. I think those are going to be 2 really challenging matchups there. At number 3, here's probably where we start to really lock in and solidify. Alabama, the Crimson Tide. I don't care that Nick Saban's not there. Alabama is Alabama, and until they prove it otherwise, I think they're going to be at the top of the SEC without major attrition. They get Western Kentucky, South Florida, Wisconsin, and then a bye week. So an easy start there. Projected 9 wins on the season. I think they get there quite easily. Georgia in Tuscaloosa. That'll be an awesome game. Some really good games going on that weekend. Then Vanderbilt, South Carolina, Tennessee, Missouri. So a 5-game SEC stretch, including a road game to Knoxville. If I had to call it right now, I'd call Georgia at home a loss, but Alabama always plays Georgia tough. So more of a toss-up, in my opinion. Winnable for the Tide. Winnable. Don't know that I'd pick it, though. Vanderbilt, winnable. South Carolina, winnable. Tennessee, winnable. But I think that's going to be a night game at Neyland. The atmosphere there is going to be insane. So by the time we get to the 3rd Saturday in October, might be leaning Tennessee here on the SEC Recap Podcast. No surprise to a lot of you, I'm sure. And then Missouri, that's winnable. They get a bye week, then LSU, Mercer, Oklahoma, Auburn. LSU on the road in Baton Rouge. That one could sneak up and bite the Tide. Oklahoma on the road. Think Alabama will be okay there, but I wouldn't overlook it for the Iron Bowl. Auburn at home. I do think Alabama gets Auburn there to end the season. So potentially 2 SEC losses, one of them being a road game at Tennessee, who, by the way, Tennessee could be a playoff contender. So, now that we're here kind of in that top 5, like we're looking at Ole Miss, Alabama, Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, maybe if they can get to 10-2, like, Alabama, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Missouri, like what do those teams look like with two SEC losses? What do we really start to look at and compare to see if, we're getting four SEC teams in that 12-team playoff. At number 2, no surprise, the Texas Longhorns, stacked with talent, super manageable schedule. They got Colorado State, Michigan, really great non-conference game there, UTSA, UL Monroe, and Mississippi State, the only SEC game. So they're winning state. I think they're beating Oklahoma and Dallas off a bye week. They get Georgia at home. That will be the game. That will be the game where we know who is the top dog or the top bull in the SEC. Home game. I know Longhorns fans are licking their lips for that game. As good as we all think Georgia's going to be, Texas could be that good too, and they could beat Georgia at home. Next week they get Vanderbilt, bye week, Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky, A&M. I do not believe they drop a single one of those games. Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky, Texas A&M. Maybe Texas A&M plays them close. But for me, that is such a winnable schedule through and through SEC play for the Texas Longhorns, that Georgia game being the only one that I would consider a toss-up. Which means at the top of the slate, once again, we have the Georgia Bulldogs. I know 2023 did not end the way that Dogs fans wanted. You ended up with Florida State in the, was the Orange Bowl, whichever bowl game that was, and blew them out. But hey, you blew them out. You handled business with Florida State fans, whining and complaining the whole time. So Georgia just continues to do what you absolutely have to do, which is recruit, develop, and dominate in the SEC. They open with Clemson this week, which I think, whether you're an SEC fan or not, going to be an absolute skull dragging of Clemson. I do not think that game is going to be close. Then they got Tennessee Tech and Kentucky. They're going win-win there, win-win-win, including an SEC game there. On the road at Alabama, could be tough, but I'm picking Georgia to win that one. Auburn, Mississippi State at Texas. On the road, Bama, home, Auburn, Mississippi State, on the road, Texas. Could be a little tough stretch there, but Kirby Smart, he's not going to let those dudes slack at all. Then they get a bye week. You got Florida for the neutral site, Ole Miss, Tennessee at home, UMass, Georgia Tech, Florida, Ole Miss, Tennessee. I think Georgia's probably winning all three of those games. So is there the potential for Georgia to drop at Alabama? Absolutely. Potential for Georgia to drop at Texas? Absolutely. Again, we're going to, when those games play out, as those games play out, we will see. I've got a way to factor in those head-to-head matchups into the model. We will be prepared for that and adjust accordingly here on the SEC Recap Podcast. Guys, so there you have it, the 2024 Power Rankings. I'll throw them here, starting with 16, Vanderbilt, Mississippi State, Arkansas, South Carolina, Florida, Kentucky, Auburn, LSU, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, Mizzou, Alabama, Texas, Georgia to round it out. You will see some dynamic movement there, 4 through 9. I promise. We got kickoff starting tomorrow. Let's run through the lineup really quick. Look at the lines. We'll pick some games. Looking at the schedule here, let me maximize. Arkansas, huge line, 48.5 versus Pine Bluff, win. Mizzou, 46.5 versus Murray State at home, win. On Friday, Temple at Oklahoma, huge line, minus 42.5, win. Clemson at Georgia, Mercedes-Benz, 13.5-point line. I think Georgia takes care of business. Virginia Tech at Vanderbilt, Virginia Tech, minus 13.5. That's a dub for the Hokies. Tennessee, minus 38.5. Chattanooga, give me the Vols, baby. Texas, minus 32. Colorado State. Hook 'em. Miami at Florida. Miami actually a 2.5-point road favorite. Not buying into that. It's an afternoon game, but it is the Swamp. Gators fans will be up for that game. Home environment. Give me the Florida Gators to beat Miami and get the upset game one. Old Dominion at South Carolina. South Carolina 21-point favorite. Dub. Eastern Kentucky at Mississippi State. Mississippi State a 3.5 touchdown favorite. Give me the Bulldogs. Western Kentucky at Alabama. Not even going to be close. Furman at Ole Miss. Not going to be close. Notre Dame at A&M. A&M a 3-point home favorite. One of the games I will be watching because I do think this is a winnable game for Texas A&M. Notre Dame really good. What does their depth look like, though? I'm going to stay an SEC homer for week one. I want the SEC to be undefeated coming out of that first week. So give me A&M. All right. Alabama A&M at Auburn. Auburn, huge favorite. Give me the dub. Southern Miss at Kentucky for the last game of the evening. Kentucky 28-point favorite. Give me Kentucky. On Sunday, we get USC at number 13 LSU, ranked matchup there. LSU -4. This game is in Vegas. Okay, so neutral site. But give me LSU with those points there. I think 4 points. I think LSU can handle that. Give me LSU by 6. All right. So there you go, guys. That's it. That's my pick'ems for the week. Thank you once again for tuning in. Don't forget to check out the merch on the store. Follow me on Twitter at SEC Recap. Find all the t-shirts and stuff at bonfire.com/store/SEC Recap. All the content, once it's posted, goes to secrecap.com. Looking forward to some week one action. I will be back here to recap it all for you. Thanks for tuning in. Great to see you. Great to be back. Thanks for listening to the SEC Recap Podcast.